Tonight on Bridge City News, a leading economist says if the CN Rail strike continues, it could cost our economy billions of dollars. New legislation introduced by the UCP government will offer a break to smaller farms across Alberta. And after a 29-year drought, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are Grey Cup champions. We have player reactions from Calgary.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. The ongoing CN Rail strike could cost our economy close to $3 billion if it lasts until December 5th, when Parliament is set to reconvene. Now, that's according to a TD senior economist. Industries from farming to mining and fertilizer have urged Ottawa to take immediate action to resolve the dispute. Some have echoed the Alberta government's push to bring back the MPs early and order back-to-work legislation. With more than 90% of grain moved by rail, the work stoppage has triggered worries among grain elevators, operators, and farmers about lost sales and contract penalties following a soggy harvest. Other groups, such as the National Farmers Union, have called for further negotiation to address rail workers' safety concerns. The CN Rail strike impact is not hitting farmers on the prairies as hard as it is for people in Quebec. A spokesperson for Sask Energy says 92% of Saskatchewan is served by natural gas. Federated Cooperatives Limited says it mostly uses pipelines and trucks to transport propane. Co-op says some producers in the province still use propane to dry the grain. Propane storage has mostly been affecting Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. Quebec uses more than 6 million litres of propane each and every week. New legislation introduced by Alberta Agriculture Minister Devin Dreeshen is set to overhaul rules on farms and ranches previously put in place by the former NDP government. With the new legislation, most Alberta farm operations will no longer have to follow employment standard rules or have workplace insurance. The bill also states that farm workers would no longer have the right to unionize. Currently, all paid farm workers, excluding family members, must have workers' compensation coverage for death or disability. Farmers must also abide by employment standards covering minimum wage, leaves, termination notices, and record keeping. Under the new bill, those rules would only apply to large agricultural operations. Farms which have 5 or fewer paid workers would be exempt. Alberta Justice Minister Doug Schweitzer announced today that the province will be doubling the number of Crown articling students. The UCP says by doing so, it will strengthen our justice system with more of a focus in rural Alberta. Government articling students are law grad students who gain practical experience performing some of the duties of the Crown prosecutors. The province currently hires 8 articling students per year, but 8 more will be hired by the year 2021. The UCP is hopeful that much of the homegrown talent will stay right here in Alberta. Federal Justice Department lawyers say they are appealing a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling because it limits the number of First Nations families that could receive compensation. If applied according to the ruling, only those taken from their parents in the last 13 years would be eligible for compensation of $40,000. Lawyers are expected to ask the court to stay the tribunal's September order so the government can pursue a settlement in a separate class action case brought earlier this year. That case would include compensation for families going back to 1991. Katie Jo Rabbit was recently named one of the top 40 under 40 by the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce. Rabbit is a Blackfoot woman who works in a modern world while upholding traditional Blackfoot values. She works as the assistant manager of the Samis Aboriginal Employment and Training Association. Rabbit says she is thankful that she can help other Indigenous people in our community find employment.
I think that Samis is a great place to start. We're here as mentors, and that's a really great value of First Nations because we like to mentor and help each other out. And so if you come here, we will do our best to help you do that and really set some goals to help you move forward. Currently, Samis offers a career decision-making job search program. So that is just a basic, almost a mentorship program where clients can come in, take a look at what we have to offer based on what their career plan is after meeting with an employment counselor. In the past, we have done power line technician program, we've done a carpentry program, admin and line cook in partnership with the Lethbridge College. Currently, we are running an Indigenous Entrepreneur Arts program in partnership with the Aboriginal Business Links.
For more information of the programs and services available, you can call the Samis Aboriginal Employment and Training Association at 403-320-7699. This is the start of Addictions Awareness Week. A special walk took place beginning at Lethbridge City Hall earlier today to bring awareness of the wraparound supports the city has to offer.
We have representation here today from people from harm reduction, prevention, treatment, detox, enforcement, kind of all throughout our city, just to raise awarenesses, one, about the programs that we do have to offer for people with addictions in our community, as well as an opportunity to raise awareness about the complexity of addiction. If you look at the people that are here today, they all kind of represent a different area of that service and of the issue and trying to overcome what's happening in our community right now.
I think it's important, the awareness around addictions and how it affects every walk of life, and that it's not just one demographic.
Well, I've been an alcoholic myself. I've been sober, well, in my early or late 30s. I've been sober since. I like to bring out awareness, that people can do it, but only on their own pace.
I volunteer because I care for the people downtown. I care for them. And not to mention, I used to be part of like that before, but not anymore.
The Opioids Don't Discriminate exhibit ran at the downtown Lethbridge Transit Terminal over the weekend. It was a collaboration of Alberta Health Services, the Canadian Mental Health Association, and Heart of the City.
I think with everything going on in Lethbridge right now, this exhibit is incredibly timely in that it's not just about educating about what opioids are. We have a lot of that information. It has that in there, but it also tells some stories and makes it very personal and gives people the tools they need if they're trying to ask for help or if they're wanting to give help to people. You can walk through Max, David, and Natasha's footsteps, see what happened to them, and learn through their experiences. So it's a very interactive exhibit. So what you do is, as you go into the room, you will see signs that say, you are David, you are Max, you are Natasha. You choose one of those, and you actually have a little stone that you put in your shoe. And as you have that stone in your shoe, you'll be told to do different things with it throughout the exhibit. Ways to relieve that pain, ways to ignore that pain, or what you're supposed to do to really get you into the mindset of what's going on with these characters.
There have been many cries from business owners around the supervised consumption site in Lethbridge to have it shut down. Funding for all sites across the province is being reviewed right now. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf stopped by our studio recently, and he says shutting down the SES at Arches might not be the right approach.
What we need to do is say, where are we going? Harm reduction fills part of the spectrum of care, and that is valid. And it does give a lot of these people a chance at another day. So where do we want to go from here? How do we get them into treatment? How do we get them into recovery? How do we get them onto the next step? And how do we address those that, for our best efforts, don't accept those treatments?
Get to the full interview with MLA Newdorf discussing the opioid crisis in our city and where the UCP is cutting back to try and get our province back to black. That's coming up in the second half of our show. A special breakfast and Christmas craft sale was held this weekend in Coaldale. It was a fundraiser put on by the Rehoboth Ministries to help expand services provided for adults living with disabilities.
We have our big pancake breakfast, Christmas craft sale, poinsettia sale, children's craft fundraiser. The fundraising, the pancake breakfast is put on by our auxiliary, and it's a wonderful group of people that get together and serve delicious pancakes, and the monies that is generated through the pancake breakfast goes into the Coaldale program and the Lethbridge program. Right now we're focused on putting together or building a sensory park. So all the crafts that you see in the storefront, we have the individuals that we're serving, they volunteer their time to create these beautiful, beautiful crafts.
A 23-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman died following a crash between an SUV and a sedan in northern Alberta yesterday afternoon. RCMP say the accident occurred on Highway 2 just northwest of Slave Lake. Police diverted traffic for a few hours around the crash site, which was described as very icy. The highway has since reopened in both directions as police continue to investigate. The UCP government did not include funding for Highway 3 twinning in last month's budget, so the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association is hoping this does not happen again in the future. They're asking the province to create a program to focus on the project and putting a minimum cost of $800,000 per 10-kilometer section for engineering. In a media release today, the group says $10 million per year is needed to finalize engineering, utility relocation, and environmental impact design along the corridor. Churches are working alongside local businesses following devastating flooding in northern England. As we hear in this next report, there's one church in particular which has been responding to the crisis in a powerful way.
As extreme floods have wreaked havoc across the north of England, churches are at the forefront of providing practical and spiritual support to the many families whose lives have been devastated by this disaster. Campus pastor at Legacy Church in Doncaster, Matt Boyle, explains how they were quick to mobilise vital help in some of the worst hit areas.
We went and visited some residents. We just went to see what the need is. We sent a team up to do some clear up in one of the caravan sites. Every single one of those caravans has been completely turned upside down. So we've got two teams out at the moment in two of the worst affected areas, and what they're doing is joining in the efforts with the local community that are there as well. And one of the amazing things is just to see the church come together with the community, and so that people are seeing the church in the most awful of circumstances for them, just shining a light.
Boyle says with the temperatures plummeting and Christmas approaching, they're distributing packs of supplies to help families get through the harsh winter months ahead.
We're also working with local organisations for a Christmas present appeal. Many families we've spoken to, presents have been completely gone. It's not been covered by house insurance. We've also got a couple of hundred people coming in to wrap hampers, gifts, cleaning hampers, and just do some practical things that we can do immediately.
And these volunteers at Legacy Church explain what motivates them to give up their time to lend their support.
Doncaster's in a needy time right now, and as a church we just want to help our community. I'm passionate about people, so yeah, I just really want to just help in the best way that I can.
For me, it's because you can see the devastation on TV, and that's one thing, kind of having the emotion and hoping the people are all right. But for us, it's right on our doorstep, and so we can actually do something about it. So we just wanted to get our heads and our money together and just see how much support we can actually give to the people that are close to us.
Well, back in 2007, my community got flooded as well. So I remember what that was like, and I want to be part of helping those who have been flooded recently.
This caravan park resident, Stuart, says the help they've received from the church has been a real lifeline at this difficult time.
Churches have been absolutely fantastic, been down with hot foods and drinks and cleaning supplies to help clean up. So brilliant.
Meanwhile, CBN Europe's aid and relief organisation Operation Blessing is working to fundraise and support the work of Legacy Church Doncaster as they demonstrate the love of Jesus to many more residents like Stuart. Legacy Church's senior leader is Del Jones.
For me, with Operation Blessing partnering with us, this is amazing for us because it's there are people, we can be here on the ground, but the way I look at it, we're all planting seeds, but there are people in Operation Blessing that can help us with their prayers and they can help us with their finance. So as their finance come in, we can then appropriately disperse that finance to help our community in best way that we can help them.
It was on this day that U.S. President John F. Kennedy is laid to rest. New details emerge about the Iran-Contra affair, and baseball great Joe DiMaggio was born. This is Today in History for November the 25th.
November 25th, 1963. Three days after his slaying in Dallas, the body of President John F. Kennedy is laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery. 1986. In Washington, new details about the Iran-Contra affair engulfed President Ronald Reagan's administration. Reagan and Attorney General Edwin Meese reveal profits from secret arms sales to Iran have been diverted to the Contra rebels in Nicaragua. 1783. British forces evacuate New York, their last military position in the United States during the Revolutionary War. 1999. Off the Florida coast, fishermen rescue Elian Gonzalez after he survived a shipwreck while trying to reach the U.S. with his mother. An international custody battle soon unfolds between Elian's father in Cuba and the boy's Miami relatives. The following year, the U.S. government removes Elian from those relatives and returns him to his father. And 1914.
You're not only doing it for yourself, but at the fans.
Joe DiMaggio, one of baseball's greatest hitters and center fielders, was born in Martinez, California. Today in History, November 25th, Tim McGuire, The Associated Press.
After 29 years, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are champions once again. The Bombers beat out the Hamilton Ticats 33-12 at the Grey Cup in Calgary last night. Winnipeg's running back Andrew Harris was named the game's most valuable player and most outstanding Canadian. Harris, who's from Manitoba, says the win is a dream come true.
The city is going off. This is what they've been waiting for and asking for, and we were able to deliver. And I know that they're very, very proud, very excited, and we're just looking forward to going and enjoy that with them. We've been underdogs all year, counted out all year. This is just again a dream come true.
Such a roller coaster this year. We started off so hot, and then everything that's happened. Outside the locker room and inside the locker room. We just stuck with it, man. We just stayed close. We knew we had something special in here, and we really believed, and it paid off, man. I can't say it enough. I can't be any more proud of everybody in this organization right now.
Meanwhile, the players for the Hamilton Ticats, a team which finished with the best record in the CFL, are taking the loss pretty hard. Quarterback Dane Evans says it hurts, and it was not the result his team was expecting.
It just sucks, man. Honestly, I don't know if you can use that or not, but it is just terrible. Not the way we would pictured it, not the way that we wanted it, and it's all because of us. I mean, they had a great game plan, but we didn't execute.
Winnipeg's always been one of those teams where they're well coached, they're super well coached, they're very disciplined. They probably have the least amount of penalties in the CFL. So when you're playing against a team like that, you have to start fast, you have to do your job, you can't miss assignments and stuff like that. The tough part is just getting through the off season, and just staying focused and motivating yourself to come back better and improved and stuff, but it's going to hurt until the season starts.
A tough loss for the Ticats, but still a great win for the Bombers, who haven't won a Grey Cup since 1990. Congratulations. We had lots of blue sky, but cooler today. The mercury will be dropping with a little snow on the way. Complete look at the weather picture is coming up. Lots of sunshine again today, but cooler. Tonight, some clouds rolling in with a low near -8. Tomorrow, slight chance of flurries developing with a high of only -3. Snow is on the way on Wednesday with the mercury dropping to -6. Periods of snow and -11 degrees for Thursday. Friday, the flurry should taper off and we should see a high of -10. Not a bad weekend is shaping up. Sunshine a -3 for Saturday, sunny a -2 for Sunday. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 2 degrees with an average low of -9. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1939 at 16 degrees. And the record low was a very cold -28 in 1985. Looking at tomorrow's national forecast now, a chance of showers and a high of 7 degrees for Victoria, BC. Rain and 5 degrees is on tap for Vancouver. A chance of flurries and -4 for Calgary on Tuesday. Periods of light snow and -4 degrees as well for Edmonton. Expect lots of clouds and -3 in Regina tomorrow. Just a few clouds and -4 for Saskatoon. Winnipeg, where the city is celebrating its Grey Cup win, should receive light snow and a high of -2 for tomorrow. Expect sun mixed with cloud and a high of 10 degrees for Toronto. Drizzle and 7 degrees is on tap for Ottawa. A good chance of showers and 7 as well for Montreal on Tuesday. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will be mostly cloudy and 6. Halifax, Nova Scotia will have sunshine and 8. Charlottetown, PEI will be partly cloudy and 5. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect light showers with a high near 4 degrees for tomorrow. The CN Rail strike is now in its 7th day. Talks are still ongoing in Montreal under the watch of federal mediators. Around 3,200 workers walked off the job last Tuesday, impacting shipping across the country. Industry members from farming to mining have been urging Ottawa to take immediate action to resolve the dispute. A senior TD economist says if the strike continues until December 5th, when Parliament resumes, it could cost the Canadian economy up to $3 billion. When it comes to investing in the oil and gas sector, is Alberta still ranked near the top? Not according to a senior policy analyst with the Fraser Institute. Ashley Stedman says it appears as though Canada may have lost its competitive edge to the United States.
Investors really said that Canada is a high-risk place to invest right now, given the uncertain and subjective regulatory environment that we're seeing here. So those are some of the comments that we see, and ultimately it's not good news for Canada.
The full interview with Ashley Stedman and BCN's Paul Arthur discussing what our country needs to do to attract more investors. That's coming up after business news. There was a blockbuster agreement today in the online brokerage industry. Charles Schwab is buying rival TD Ameritrade in a $26 billion stock swap. Competitive pressure has already forced brokerages to make it free for customers to trade stocks online, and the Schwab's buyout combines two of the biggest players in the industry. The creation of this large company may also draw scrutiny from antitrust regulators. The TD Bank holds around 43% of Ameritrade stock. It is expected to come out of this with around 13% stake in the company. The very first cargo-carrying robot is now on sale just in time for Christmas. Its makers believe it's the future, but with a $3,250 US price tag, who is ready to ditch their second vehicle for this two-wheeled rover?
JITA is a mobile carrier. It's a robot, and it enables you to make pedestrian mobility choices. Instead of reaching for the keys to the car, you can go out for a walk with JITA.
Oh my goodness! That is so cool. I just didn't want to go out because it's so cold, so I ordered it to bring me lunch.
Yeah, so you can like walk to the market and stuff.
That's cool. Cool. We will.
The problem with the JITA is that grocery delivery is something that's much easier done by grocery stores or e-commerce players than it is by somebody buying a $3,000+ robot to actually follow them down the block.
We're trying to make the thing that's not going to keep you in front of a screen longer. We're trying to get you out in the world and connected with that neighborhood you decided to move to because it was so walkable.
And the best part is, it doesn't even shed. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 78 points on the day to 17,032. The Dow was up 190 points to 28,066. The S&P 500 was up 23 points to 3133, and the Nasdaq was up 112 points to 8632. Oil was up 14 cents on the day to 57.91 per barrel. Natural gas was down 15 cents to 2.52. Gold was down 33 cents to $14.55 an ounce, and silver was unchanged at $16.89 per ounce. Wheat is at $235 per metric ton, barley's at $237, canola's at $4.59, and corn is at $274 per metric ton. Live cattle were up $1.03 to $120.53, feeder cattle were up $2.70 to $143.30, and lean hogs were down 20 cents to $61.65. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 75.19 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the ongoing CN rail strike could cost our economy close to $3 billion if it lasts until December 5th, when Parliament is set to reconvene. Now that's according to a leading TD Senior Bank economist. Industries from farming to mining and fertilizer have urged Ottawa to take immediate action to resolve the dispute. Some have echoed the Alberta government's push to bring back the MPs early in order back-to-work legislation. It appears as though many investors are choosing to park their money in the United States instead of Canada. A senior policy analyst with the Fraser Institute says Canada may be losing its competitive advantage in the oil and gas sector. Paul Arthur has that interview next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come to the Nikayuko Japanese Garden on Friday, November 29th as they kick off the season with their Winter Light Festival, which will run until January 31st. On that evening, the gates will open at 6 p.m. with greetings from sponsors and dignitaries at 7. Admission is $9 for adults, $7 for kids ages 6 to 15, and ticket packages, which include food and drinks, are also available. For more information, visit nikayuko.com. The 15th annual Lethbridge Mayor's Prayer Breakfast is taking place Saturday, November 30th at 9 a.m. at the Sandman Signature Lethbridge Lodge. Put on by the Lethbridge Evangelical Ministerial Association, come join in the gathering to honor and pray for those who have dedicated their lives to the service of our community. Tickets are $20 and can be purchased by calling 403-308-1696 or email mpblethbridge@gmail.com. Aged Care Columbia is pleased to invite you to their Christmas market on Tuesday, December 3rd from 1 to 4 p.m. at 785 Columbia Boulevard West in Lethbridge. Open to the whole family. Find custom-made crafts, clothing, decor, household goods, baking, and more. Also, get a picture with Santa for $1 and enjoy delicious hot chocolate with cookies for $2. Proceeds will go to the Lethbridge Food Bank. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Alberta has long been one of the top destinations for oil and gas investments, but not so much over the last few years. So where do we rank now compared to our American and provincial competitors? We are joined by Ashley Stedman, Senior Policy Analyst with the Fraser Institute and co-author of the Canada-U.S. Energy Sector Competitiveness Survey 2019, which you can see online at fraserinstitute.org. Ashley, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me on.
You bet. Can you first of all tell us, Ashley, how you went about gathering these numbers and comparisons for the survey? Who did you talk to? Which states did you compare our provinces to? That sort of thing?
Yeah, so once again this year we surveyed oil and gas investors to find out which policies detract or deter investment. And we like to see this survey as a report card on government policy. And what we found this year is that U.S. jurisdictions dominate the list of top performers, while Canadian jurisdictions are really falling behind, and they're seen as unattractive in the eyes of investors.
Yeah, that's not a good place to be. So where did Alberta rank this year? And did any of our provinces actually make it into the top 10 for North America?
Yeah, so we ranked 5 Canadian provinces and 15 U.S. states in our survey this year, and Alberta ranks 16th out of 20 jurisdictions, so that would be in the bottom half of jurisdictions overall in the survey. And really what we're seeing here is that investors are raising a red flag in terms of Canada having unattractive policies, and none of the Canadian jurisdictions made the list of top performers.
Yeah, that is a disappointment, big time. Now, which U.S. states did manage to crack the top 10 this year? Was Texas near the top again?
Yeah, so Texas is the top performer in this year's survey. The second jurisdiction is Oklahoma, third is Kansas, and then we see a number of other U.S. jurisdictions rounding out that list of the top 10, including competitors like North Dakota, whereas we see Canadian jurisdictions falling behind. The top performing Canadian jurisdiction is Saskatchewan this year, and it ranks 13th, which is far behind the top 10 performer.
Mm-hmm. So what did oil executives list as the barriers to investment in Alberta? Now, does this tie in with the uncertainty concerning environmental regulations, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so this year the top areas of concern for Alberta listed by investors were uncertainty concerning environmental regulations. We saw 80% of respondents were deterred by this factor in Alberta compared to only 9% for Texas. The second area was regulatory duplication and inconsistencies. We see that 65% of respondents were deterred by this factor in Alberta compared to only 8% for Texas. And then the third area of concern was the high cost of regulatory compliance in this province. So 65% of respondents were deterred by that factor, whereas only 10% were deterred in Texas.
Okay, I know our premier just made a trip to Texas to try to spur investment here, and that's one of the things he brought up was the red tape regulation issues, high taxes, that sort of thing. So obviously they are aware of this, so they're going to try to reduce that. And would you say from this particular study here that if in fact we were able to cut those red tape regulatory issues, that would spur in fact more oil and gas investment in our province?
Yeah, so really what we're seeing is that onerous and uncertain regulations are really taking their toll on Canada's energy sector. And what we want to see is policymakers in Ottawa and in Edmonton working towards streamlining regulations and adopting competitive policies to make our energy sector attractive for investment once again.
Yeah, it needs to happen. Now, labor regulations and employment agreements also came up as a concern to potential investors. Can you give us any examples of what specifically causes concern in that area?
Yeah, so this is a broad category that we ask investors about. So we cannot point to specific policies in that area, but broadly it looks at the impact of labor regulations, the impact of employment agreements, and local hiring requirements, things like that. So we do see this as a concern, but it wasn't the top concern listed by investors this year.
Right. And one of the other concerns, speaking of, hiring people, is again the available workforce, the quality of that workforce. Are we doing okay in that area?
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't one of the major areas where we saw significant concern. The major areas of concern are really uncertainty surrounding environmental regulations and regulatory duplication and inconsistencies. We're seeing a lot of overlap between provincial and federal regulations, and that seems to be what the problem is for investors and why they're moving their investment opportunities and their capital elsewhere.
Right. And high taxes was also, of course, another factor here as well, right? And so how did we compare, I guess, with taxes in Alberta specifically compared to some of the top jurisdictions south of the border?
Yeah, so when we look at taxation in general and how investors perceive taxation in Alberta, what we see as 53% of respondents were deterred by taxation in Alberta compared to only 12% in Texas. So again, there's considerable room for improvement in the eyes of investors on this factor as well.
Well, I mean, that's like a four times factor here. I mean, wow. So obviously taxes, something has to be done there to bring that into alignment here with our competitors. Otherwise, we'll continue to lose business south of the border. A couple of policy areas that hamper investor perceptions of Canadian jurisdictions. Uncertainty concerning disputed land claims and also uncertainty over which areas will be protected. Can you unpack that a bit for us?
Yeah, so actually we see disputed land claims and protected areas as a concern of mining investors and petroleum investors. And really it's just around uncertainty in these areas around, what areas will be protected as parks or disputed land claims, those kind of issues. So we see that as an issue across the board between mining and petroleum investors in this country, and really in Alberta and British Columbia in particular.
Now, do they face the similar problems south of the border on those two issues, or is it, again, a huge gap between north and south here?
We do see significant concern over these factors in jurisdictions like Alberta and BC over other competing jurisdictions as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would probably behoove us to take a look at what they are doing and saying, hey, maybe they're doing something that works that we aren't doing, and we can learn from it. It is interesting that Saskatchewan and Newfoundland outdid Alberta. I think you mentioned Saskatchewan was on top as far as our provincial jurisdictions here for oil and gas investment. So what are they doing better than we are in Saskatchewan and Newfoundland?
Yeah, so when we look at factors like uncertainty concerning environmental regulations, and actually in particular regulatory duplication and inconsistencies, these are areas where these provinces, that is Saskatchewan and Newfoundland, tend to perform better than Alberta. So it seems like there's less overlap in regulations in these provinces compared to Alberta.
Okay. For the third straight year, British Columbia is Canada's least attractive jurisdiction for oil and gas investment. Maybe the most beautiful province in Canada. But man, something's going on with the oil and gas business there. So what is it specifically that investors don't like about BC?
Yeah, so this year British Columbia was the worst performing jurisdiction in Canada, and it ranked 19th out of 20th, so it's the second worst overall in the survey. And this year investors pointed to uncertainty concerning environmental regulations, taxation, and concerns over political stabilities as the major areas of concern in that province.
Interesting. So the whole minority government situation perhaps doesn't help oil and gas investment because they're not sure which way it's going to go?
Yeah, I mean, we did see that 87% of respondents were deterred by political stability in that province, and that's ultimately a major area of concern for investors this year.
87%. Okay, that is high for the political side of things. Now, Alberta, how did we do, I guess, in Alberta, and then compare that to how much political instability factored in Texas, for example?
Yeah, so I mean, we do see that political stability is not as much of a concern in Alberta as it was in one of the top 3 areas of concern listed by investors. We do see that American jurisdictions perform better across the board on a number of areas, and ultimately it shows that there's considerable room for improvement here in Canada.
Yeah, the jurisdictions of Texas and Oklahoma consistently rank in the top 10 over the years, and so they are doing some things differently. Is there anything that jumps out at you from your survey here that we should, again, hey, pay attention to, saying, all right, let's do what they're doing here to attract more investment?
Yeah, so we just see that investors are really pointing to stability in terms of the regulatory environment south of the border. And in jurisdictions like Texas, we see that only 9% are deterred by uncertainty concerning environmental regulations compared to 80% here in Alberta. So really, this is an area where we see that there's a lot more stability in terms of the regulatory environment south of the border, and investors are paying attention to that.
Yeah. All right. Can you share some of the actual comments that oil executives made about Canada, just to give our viewers an idea of what comes to mind when investors think about investing here?
Yeah, so we see pipeline concerns as one of the major factors that is cited by investors in the comment section. So we know that insufficient pipeline capacity is deterring investors, and that is reflected in the comment section. And investors really said that Canada is a high risk place to invest right now, given the uncertain and subjective regulatory environment that we're seeing here. So those are some of the comments that we see, and ultimately it's not good news for Canada.
Pipelines, okay. Heard that before. Now on the flip side, can you share a few of the comments investors made about American states? And again, well, I guess the comments are going to be something a little more along the positive lines, right?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of Texas, we saw some comments about approval processes being timely, and that's again speaking to the fact that the regulatory environment is much more certain there in terms of issuing permits, and that is something that we need to focus on here in Canada, of getting our regulatory environment to be competitive with our neighbors south of the border.
Okay. Can you kind of recap here? What does Canada need to change then to attract oil and gas investment?
Yeah, so if policymakers are serious about restoring investment attractiveness in Canada's energy sector, they're going to focus on streamlining regulations and ultimately adopting competitive policies to ensure that this country is attractive in the eyes of oil and gas investors once again.
Yeah, it boils down to something pretty simple, doesn't it, right? I mean, lower taxes, better regulations and so forth. Got to get some certainty, a stable business environment. So the question is, I guess, will these changes be made? And if so, how long will it take to make these changes, to actually get them in place? I don't know if your survey addressed that. I mean, how long it would take to get these things in place here in Canada?
Yeah, so we don't ask a question in regards to timelines, but we do know that it takes time for investor perceptions to change. So when those policy changes happen, it does take time to trickle down to investors so that they're aware of what the policy environment looks like.
How long do you think it? I mean, let's say they did actually make these changes in Alberta and Canada, and we know Alberta is making changes as we speak. But if everything came together and gelled, and we made some really good positives, how long would it take for investors to respond to that? I mean, I guess in my mind, I think this through. Okay, political instability was one of the factors here as well. Would they hesitate for a significant time, just out of concern that the next government elected, be it provincially or federally, would simply change regulations and taxes back to where they were before, again creating an uncertain investment environment?
Yeah, so really we have to let future surveys tell us that we want to see those changes made in Ottawa and in Edmonton, and then we will look to future survey publications to tell us when that trickles down to investors and how investors perceive Canada at that time.
Yeah, perception does matter in this business, doesn't it? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ashley.
Thanks so much for having me on.
You bet. Ashley Steadman, she's the co-author of the Canada-U.S. Energy Sector Competitiveness Survey 2019. You can read that in its full detail at fraserinstitute.org.
Alberta municipalities, businesses, public sector unions, and average everyday Albertans are still pondering the recent budget which came out. In studio now to discuss the budget and other things which impact us here in the Windy City is UCP Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf. Nathan, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Now, you're also in Edmonton with a whole bunch of people. Team Lethbridge, tell me a bit about that. What happened there?
Yeah, it's great. Team Lethbridge is a group of organizations, 22, 23. It's continued to grow. They come up to Edmonton to meet with the government and the opposition and just share the successes and stories that we have in Lethbridge and make sure that the government is aware of what we're doing down here.
That's wonderful. Now, let's talk a bit about the budget. You're getting a lot of flack from unions about public sector wage cutbacks. How is this really going to affect our doctors, our nurses, and our teachers here?
It's a significant issue. We have heard a lot about it. At this point, we're still at negotiation, pre-negotiation, and the whole process coming up to arbitration. So there's lots of negotiating that goes on in the public eye. When we talk wage rollbacks, that has been countered or maybe even presupposed by a request for a 5 to 8% increase by the unions. At this point in time of fiscal restraint, we're really projecting a 0% growth. And that's, I think, what we're hoping to land on. But the process will take its place, and they will have their day to share their concerns on their side.
Also, some concerns as well voiced by university and college staff over reduced budgets. Can you talk to that?
Absolutely. If there was one area that probably saw a little bit more adjustment than most, it was advanced education. So I've been working closely with the boards and administrations of both institutions and trying to still find our way through with that. There's challenges, whether it's removing the cap on tuition, which some students worried. That's a measure of last resort, but it's part of the process. But the bigger part that goes unseen is removing some of the red tape and restrictions on universities for being able to utilize empty buildings, empty space in the private sector and recover huge dollars in terms of rent or collaborative movements with the private sector. So as a whole package, I think there's a way forward, even if there's some challenges in the near future.
Now, one of the concerns being brought up by some residents as well is why the province decided not to build any new schools in our city, even though there's a growing population, schools may be overcrowded.
That's something I continue to advocate for behind closed doors. I know the growth in Lethbridge and have to speak to that to the minister. I think in this case, they picked 25 sites and they have to work with those. But in a bigger picture, what we're working with, not only with Minister of Education, but Minister of Infrastructure, setting up a 20 or 25-year plan for that capital growth, those capital needs, where they can be prioritized, where people can see a few years ahead of time what's coming up next, and hopefully work on evaluating that and planning for that. If we can plan for it, it really takes a lot of pressures off of budgets, the immediate budgets or long-term budgets, where you can see what's coming and know where you are in the queue. Every municipality around the province has got their pressures and concerns and challenges. And though I would love to see a school in Lethbridge, we didn't this time. Maybe that's due to the one being built in the south end right now. But we definitely need one going forward, and I'll be speaking to the minister about that.
Now, the construction of a lot of the new schools includes the P3 method, the public-private partnership model. Can you explain that a little more detail?
Sure. That's a model where we help, we activate the private sector for investment. They work on the whole planning and construction aspect of it to allow the province sort of like a rent-to-own scenario in layman's terms. And that allows us to build a lot more schools while maintaining a budget and getting the infrastructure. So how that's handled is key, but there's a lot of room for innovation. There's a lot of room for the private sector to be involved in these projects and allow us to get needed projects on the road sooner rather than later.
Let's talk about some other potential infrastructure projects, including maybe the potential of a new bridge for Lethbridge.
Well, that's a very interesting model. A lot of people don't know a new bridge with engineering and site surveying, those kind of things, can be upwards of $150 million. It's a significant investment, not to mention the road.
Could it be spread out, however, though?
That could be. It could be spread out with a private investment. I know Vancouver, BC has done similar things with their Port Mann Bridge. They needed to add additional lanes, something very similar to us, and they made that toll. Not a lot of people are happy with that, but that is one option of a user pay to allow for that infrastructure to come in way ahead of the curve.
I live on the west side. I wouldn't be happy about that toll.
That's true.
All the time.
But if it alleviated pressure, if it allowed another option, there's potential for that. So I'm not saying anything's set in stone, but those are ways of getting much needed infrastructure on a much quicker time frame. So we're trying to look at that and think outside the box, be creative, be innovative, and allow for some of those projects maybe to move ahead on an expedited manner.
The opioid crisis continues across many cities in our country, including here in our province, Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, and right here in Lethbridge. The UCP was also talking about potentially not advancing funding beyond March 31st for the safe consumption sites, including the one at Arches. What have you heard?
All I've heard is that we haven't projected next budget. We still have lots of conversations about this one to be had and working out the trajectory for that. I think what we do want to emphasize is that we want to go in a direction of treatment and recovery. Leaving people in a cycle of addiction is not where we want to leave them. We want to move them past that. So there's numerous things that we need in Lethbridge. We've talked about it many times before. Treatment, recovery beds that are on the way. Detox.
The counseling.
Social housing, recovery coaches. Lots of great ideas, lots of great research out there. A lot of it done here in Lethbridge from the University of Lethbridge and some professors on that. We need to have that plan well established, and then we can put funding to it. Without designating that direction, you can spend a lot of dollars and then have to reinvest dollars. We don't want to do that back and forth. We want to have a clear plan in place. I continue to emphasize the dire need that we have in Lethbridge, and having spoken to the Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and the Minister of Justice, inviting them both down again for a second trip to Lethbridge in the very near future so they can see firsthand how we need to tackle it here.
Well, the panel went across the province as well, Nathan, finding out what the average Albertan had to say about it, and a lot of business owners want to shut down entirely these safe consumption sites.
That's true, but that doesn't address the problem. It might fix one, but we still have a population that's going to be displaced. So the human element of that is what do we do there? Again, I am very strongly an advocate about a plan, about a direction. You don't want to shut a door until you've got a window to move to, and so to speak. So we really need that direction. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with this population? How are we going to address it? And I absolutely understand those businesses have coming from the private sector, having toured and spent time with those business owners. They have incredibly urgent needs.
Because a lot of these business owners, Nathan, say, we're just enabling right now, handing out the free needles. We don't have the intox, we don't have the detox, the counseling. We're just enabling. More drug dealers are moving into town. You know, we have more drug houses opening up, so.
Significant issues, and very right to be concerned about the impact of their business, the impact to our town. And then we don't want the not in my backyard syndrome, which is what we're going to have if we shut it down without a plan. So what we need to do is say, where are we going? Harm reduction fills part of the spectrum of care, and that is valid. And it does give a lot of these people a chance at another day. So where do we want to go from here? How do we get them into treatment? How do we get them into recovery? How do we get them onto the next step? And how do we address those that, for our best efforts, don't accept those treatments? So there's some significant issues, like you mentioned before, SCAN, getting them down with our police service, supporting our police service and our EMS.
We need a federal prosecutor in town as well.
We need a federal prosecutor, provincial prosecutor. We need access possibly to these drug courts, where we're getting these things addressed. That's the most important, I think, is having an answer. Just shuffling them off to another neighborhood, shuffling them off to another area is not resolving the problem, and we want to face that head on.
The province also rolled out a plan to help a lot of the RCMP or a lot of police officers as well when it comes to rural crime. Yeah. So giving peace officers, hundreds of peace officers, more responsibility. Can you talk to that a bit?
I can talk to that. I think that's a lot of rural residents are very happy to hear that, to know that their voice has finally been heard. So they don't have to take the law into their own hands. They are now able to stand up and protect their property that they've put their whole lives into. I think that really matters, as well as supporting our police force, because we know they're stretched thin. They can't be everywhere at once. So enabling them to work together. I know there's the new communication system, trying to coordinate access for the different levels of policing, so they're on the same page. So they're truly acting as one force, not multiple forces under different direction. I think there's some significant productive things to be gained by going down that way as well, and including our fire, EMS, and ambulance services as well. They play a significant part in some of that response team to different emergencies, depending what they are.
And many of the EMS people I've talked to, Nathan, they say they're already stretched. Their resources, especially when it comes to the SCS, the supervised consumption site, many people are taking time off right now, long-term disability, because they're burnt out. A lot of them are just stressed out and burnt out right now. But when it comes to the rural areas, what's interesting with Justice Minister Doug Schweitzer was saying that now people, like you said, they can protect their homes and their property without expecting maybe a legal reaction of somebody breaking into your home, threatening you and your family, and then you take a shot, hit them in the leg or the arm, and then they sue you. That's not going to be the case anymore, right?
Exactly, and we're hoping to stop it way before it gets that far. The real intent of this legislation and this direction is to let perpetrators know beforehand, hey, people are prepared and allowed to defend their property. So maybe it'll alleviate some of that pressure. They're not going to be sitting targets at this point. They can address that up front. So it's the deterrence, I think that's the key part of this direction.
Now, what about the fact that the province is taking a larger portion of revenue coming from tickets and fines, which apparently results in less money for the cities to fund a police force? How do you respond to that?
I think there's a lot of factors. Municipalities are faced with some restriction in fundings, but there has been a pattern for 25 years of continually increasing our funding levels, whether it's municipal or provincial. We've taken a very strong step in the direction of curbing that. First budget in 25 years to reduce spending. 25 years, that's a long trajectory. And
that includes other Conservative government.
And it includes many other Conservative governments. Right. So this is a big direction change, and it's not comfortable nor easy. And we're not making light of it, and we're not passing the buck. We are expecting every level of government to help us with that. There's efficiencies, there's mandates, there's cooperations, there's collaborations that we need to find. And there are levels where it's uncomfortable. This is not easy. We would all love to get a raise every year. In our personal lives, that just doesn't happen.
2-3%, that's fine, right?
That
would up with the cost of inflation?
That would be great. It's not always possible. And what we've done here is a 2.8% reduction, which is very minimal. We could go back to the austere measures in the 93 of 19%, 19% across the board. That was very, very difficult. We're nowhere near that, but we do have to make some corrections. So in perspective, this is a very thoughtful, a very targeted budget. Social services, children's services, not touched. In fact, a lot of increase. Healthcare.
What about seniors? Let's talk about seniors.
Seniors, again, it's been maintained. There are some areas where we've seen some drawback in the sense that we want to target to those who need it most. We have to make sure that seniors who are on a very fixed income and on the low end of that scale are getting the services that they need. So there'll be some income measuring. Some seniors are very, very well off, and we may be asking them to pay a little bit more for some of the services they receive if they're capable of doing so. But again, the intent is to make sure that those who really need it have the services available to them.
How about those who are on long-term disability and using AISH?
So that's a really interesting story. A lot of misinformation about AISH. A lot of people have expected that indexing to go on for years. Indexing has never happened. Never happened in Alberta. Indexing was a measure that was brought forward by the previous government before the election to start January 1, 2020. So we've never had indexing. And at this point, we pay on average $400 a month per person more than the next closest government, next closest jurisdiction. So we do have very, very healthy measures. We want to make sure that we hold the line there while we get our spending sorted out as a province. And that a lot of those people on AISH, if they went to the next closest jurisdiction with indexing in place, it would still take 20 years for them to catch up to the amounts that we pay now. So it's very measured. We're not restricting, we're not cutting. We're just holding the line, and that is challenging in many areas. We don't think it should be adverse in this area.
How about the energy industry? How is the UCP government working with the Trudeau Liberals to try and advance the energy sector, oil and gas? I mean, we heard recently about in Canada, shutting things down in Calgary, moving to Denver, Colorado, Husky Energy, laying off hundreds of people. Nathan, it's still in turmoil.
It is, absolutely. And we have some measures coming up in the next 3-4 weeks, some very exciting announcements. Some of that new drilling will be exempt from some of those fees from curtailment. We're just about through the oil by rail debacle that cost Albertans into the billion of dollars. And some initiatives that will hopefully get some drilling happening again. The key really is a pipeline. So we continue to advocate, continue to work. We do believe that there are some cooperations, some coalitions across many provinces.
Are shovels in the ground now? What's the latest?
I believe that shovels are starting in certain jurisdictions, but again, until that pipeline is connected and oil's flowing, we don't really see the benefit.
What is that going to take, maybe another couple of years?
I think it's about 2 years. So it's still a long term, but that is where we want the direction to go. And we still stand firmly behind that industry. So we want to alleviate some of the pressures in the short term, but continue to work to that long-term goal to get those resources to market.
What about the Alberta separatist movement? It's gained a lot of momentum, especially since the last federal election. What are you hearing right now?
For sure. There's a lot of people very, very frustrated. I'm sure you know some, I know some, and we feel those sentiments. They're very real, very powerful, and people want answers. People want answers from a Canadian government that has consistently forgotten the West. So we want to be managing those levels very, very well. We want to make sure that we don't see any further disruption to our economy. There's still a lot of people very proud to wear the maple leaf on their chest. And we want to be as part of Federation for as long as we can, hopefully forever.
As Jason Kenney's already said, he's a federalist. He has no desire to separate, right?
No desire to separate, but we want our voice heard. We need to matter. We've paid into Confederation for many years to the tune of $260 billion. We have contributed. We are innovators, we're leaders, and we want to make sure that that gets recognized. And we'll use every tool in the toolbox to leverage that recognition out of whoever is in government in Ottawa.
Nathan Newdorf, UCP MLA for Lethbridge East, thanks a lot for joining me in studio today.
Thank you very much for the time, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks for watching.